Hello and welcome to the Scrapbook.com YouTube channel. My name is Lauren from Lauren Taylor Made, and I'm so excited to be here on the Scrapbook.com channel to share with you how I created 2 Valentine's Day shaker cards. I'm going to be using a mix of different products offered at Scrapbook.com as well as their exclusives, and I'm most excited to share with you these 2 Sparklets collections from Buttons Galore and More. Especially that adorable heart-shaped bubble wrap. I'll definitely be saving that to look at for a while. I also have the Love You A2 die plate, and I have 6x8 paper pads in the pinks and purples, as well as acetate sheets. I have some of my adhesive out, my Artiste glue and 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive. I'll also be grabbing my 3mm thick double-sided adhesive foam roll. And what I'm going to be showing is how to use the Sizzix stencil and stamp tool from their Making Tool collection, as well as some of the Sizzix layered stencils that work perfectly with this tool, and some acrylic stamps. Now I've already used this tool. As you can see, it has some ink love on the sticky mat, and I'm going to place my stencil tool so I can stencil the tartan frame layered stencils from Sizzix. Now these stencils, because they are created to work with this tool, have little openings at the top of each stencil to line up with the pegs on the adapter piece. So I'm going through the stencils, and because I'm going to be starting with a colored cardstock, I'm going to skip the 1 stencil, and I'm only going to be using the 2, 3, and 4 layered stencils with my stencil and stamp tool. So I'm grabbing the first stencil just to see what kind of spacing I have, and then I'm going to grab the lightest shade of purple from the 6x8 purple smooth cardstock paper pad. Knowing how much space I have for my stencil, I'll go ahead and place my cardstock onto the sticky mat on my stencil and stamp tool. Now this is a much larger space than I'm going to need, but I will be trimming this down to fit on an A2 card later, and this 6x6 stencil has plenty of room for me to be able to over stencil and trim down in case I have any issues with how my ink goes through the stencil, but it ends up being just fine. I'm grabbing a few different inks from my stash that are all available at Scrapbook.com, and I'm using my blending brush, starting with Parisian Purple and the first stencil in the layers set, and I'm going to add color with my blending brush through the stencil through each of these stripes. They're all pointing in the same direction for this first layer, and there is a mask in the center for a circle, which is going to be perfect for stamping our sentiment when we're all done stenciling. After I finish the first layer, I'll go ahead and do a stencil reveal and grab the second layer of the stencil. I'm going to wipe my brush off with a microfiber cloth just to get some of that excess ink off, and I'll start with the second layer and second color in these purple colors. The second color is going to be Crushed Velvet. And I'm just going to repeat that same process. So picking up the ink with my blending brush and then blending through the stencil. This is a much darker ink in this color family, so it goes onto my cardstock through my stencil pretty quickly. For the third layer, I'm going to bring in some Lisa Horton Crafts Interference ink. These are new to me, and I've been having so much fun playing around with these colors. I'm going to be using the Lavender Fields Shimmer. It starts off purple, as you can see here, but when you add this ink to darker cardstock or darker dye ink on cardstock, you'll see there is a pretty green shimmer to it. Once I do this last stencil, I'll go ahead and lift it up so you can see how beautiful these inks work together on this light piece of purple cardstock. So here we go. I'll go ahead and slow myself down just a bit so you can see that green shimmer when it overlaps with other purples in this beautiful tartan design. So that's going to finish off my purple background, and before I remove it from the sticky pad of the Sizzix stencil and stamp tool, I want to do my stamping. I'm going to stamp with love, but it is a brand new stamp, so I'm just going to clean it off real quick before I get it placed where I want it onto the center of my background. So I have that mass circle, and I'm doing my best to get that with love sentiment centered so that I can ink it up and stamp it onto the background. For my sentiment, I'm using VersaFine Clear ink pad in the color Monarch, again, very purpley on this card, and I'm stamping it in the center of the stenciled background. I'm grabbing my rose quartz dependable pressure tool, which of course matches perfectly with our cherry blossom stencil and stamp tool. These colors are exclusive to Scrapbook.com, and there you can see my sentiment and my background. I went ahead and picked everything up, and I'm going to start my second background. And this is going to be the same stencil set, but this time with pink colors. So I'm going to grab the second lightest shade from my 6x8 pinks paper pad, and very similar to how I put together my purple background, I'm just going to repeat that with the pinks. So getting my paper placed onto the sticky mat, trying to get it centered as best as I can and straight onto the grid. I will apply my paper to the sticky mat. I did notice there was a little bit of fuzz stuck in between there, so I peeled it up because it's so easy to peel off this mat, and went ahead and secured my paper in place. I cleaned off my stencils, so I'm grabbing the second stencil in the set of 4, and I'm going to use 2 shades of pink from Scrapbook.com and another interference ink from Lisa Horton. I'm starting with the lightest color, Candy Shop Pink, and I'm going to go ahead and blend that through the first stencil onto that pink cardstock. So starting with the lightest color, using my blending brush, I use a little microfiber cloth off to the side to clean off any excess ink before moving on to the third stencil, which is the second layer for this card. And for that ink, I used Confetti Pink. And for the last stencil, I'm using the color Tropical Paradise. Again, this is Lisa Horton's Interference Dye Pigment ink. And you can see here, there is that pink with a subtle purple shimmer when I have inked it onto my background. So I'll go ahead and set this aside. I'm not going to do any stamping for this sentiment, as I'm going to use the A2 cover plate from Scrapbook.com to be the sentiment for this card. I peeled off all of my paper, and I peeled off the tool so I could add the protective sheet back, the adapter tool, and the plastic top. So now I'm going to grab some darker shades to do my frames for these shaker cards. I'm going to pick the darkest purple for the With Love purple themed shaker card. And for the pinks, I will grab the darkest pink as well, just trying to do my best to match the backgrounds to the different colors that I have through that tartan plaid stencil set. So while those 2 backgrounds are still drying off to the side, I'll go ahead and get out my Love You A2 cover plate die, and I'm going to run this through my Sizzix Big Shot Switch Plus machine, and of course using my magic mat to cut out the 2 frames. So I have the Love You in both the dark pink and dark purple. So you can see here, I just use my magic mat to cut it out, and I'm going to gently peel off the Love You frame, and I'll go ahead and actually I saved the insides of these pieces so I could do a paper piercing kind of look for a future Valentine's Day card. Now to trim down my stenciled background so they'll fit onto an A2 card, I'm going to show you how you can trim the background with a paper trimmer to be A2. So for the purple background, I'm going to go ahead and trim this down so it just lines up with the edge of the stencil on all 4 sides. Once I have that in place, I can use the design of the stencil to make sure my background is centered, and I'm going to trim the width down to 4 1/4. So I made sure that halfway through, which would be 2 1/8, was lined up to the center of that tartan plaid design. Then I knew that I just needed to trim off about 1/4 inch from both sides, so that way it would be 5.5 inches tall. So that is now 4 1/4 by 5.5 A2 in size. Now while I was doing all of that cutting, I was thinking to myself that I could do this much easier with my nested A2 rectangle. So when I cut the pink background, I'll show you a much simpler way than having to do a bunch of math on a paper trimmer. And like I said, for the purple card, I am using the With Love sentiment, so I don't need the Love You cutout. So I'll go ahead and just use my scissors to trim that out so I still have the frame in order to make a shaker panel. So for the pink background, I'm grabbing my nested A2 decorative die set, and I'm grabbing the largest die in the set, which is A2 in size, again 4 1/4 by 5.5. I'll grab some of my mint tape, which is just sitting out of frame with my mint tape dispenser. And I'll use the grid on my Scrapbook.com mat to make sure I get my die centered around that mask circle. I'm using the mint tape to keep my die in place, and I'll run this through my die cut machine again, and you can see now I have my A2 background. So much easier than having to use my paper trimmer to measure everything to create that A2 background. So now that my frames and my backgrounds are done, let's start assembling the shaker together. I have the 5x6 acetate sheets, and I'm going to trim these down to be A2 in size. So I'm trimming them down to be 5.5 by 4.25. Once I have both of these panels cut, I'll go ahead and, or the first one, I'll go ahead and cut the second one, and then we'll start with adding our acetate to the back of the frame. For this, I'm grabbing my 1/4-inch double-sided adhesive roll, and I'm going to place it on all 4 sides of my frame, so both for the purple and the pink. Once I have all 4 sides covered, I'm going to use a little poker tool to help me peel off all of the backings from those 4 pieces of double-sided adhesive, and I'll go ahead and grab my A2 piece of acetate and apply that to the back of the frame. I didn't get this piece perfectly lined up, so I'm just grabbing some large scissors to trim off the acetate that sticks out past the edge of the frame. I'll go ahead and repeat this process for the Love You frame, but I'm also going to bring in my Artiste glue to add some adhesive behind the scripty Love You sentiment. That way it really attaches to the acetate and I don't have to worry about it not sticking to the card or getting ripped in the envelope. I just want to make sure that my sentiment is attached to that acetate piece. I'll go ahead and apply that acetate to the back of the frame. I only applied a light amount of Artiste glue, so it shouldn't come out the sides. I'm just about ready to fill these shakers up, but I wanted to get my backgrounds onto my card bases. So I'm going to use some tape adhesive, my double-sided adhesive runner, to add some adhesive to the back of each of these tartan backgrounds, and I attach them to top folding A2 size card bases. So I have it for the pink, and I'll repeat that process for the purple. Once those are secured, I'll grab my 3mm, which is the triple thick double-sided adhesive foam, and I'm going to add this foam adhesive to the back side of my 2 frames. So pretty much exactly where I place the double-sided adhesive roll, I'm going to add the foam adhesive. So I'll just peel off quite a bit here, and I'm going to line it up, doing my best to make sure my foam adhesive stays hidden behind my frame. I love that these frames are just slightly wider than 1/4 inch, so that way you won't see any of that foam adhesive. I don't have to trim it down. It's already the perfect size. I'm going to add this foam adhesive to all 4 sides of my pink as well as the purple frame, and then I will peel off the release paper again using my poker tool to help. Once I have all of that foam adhesive in place, I'll be ready to start adding the little shaker bits to the inside of the cards. So I'm going to grab the 2 different colors that I have. Again, these are the Sparklets collections from Buttons Galore and More. Starting with the pink one, which is called Just Friends, I'm opening up the package and I'm going to add some to the center of this card. Since it's a large panel shaker card, I'm definitely not being stingy. I'm adding quite a bit of these different shaker elements to the inside of the card. Once I have enough and I made sure my flat-backed pearls were facing outwards as well as some of the rhinestones, I'll go ahead and add the Love You cover frame or the top of my shaker to close up the shaker panel. I'm gently pressing on all 4 sides to make sure that my little shaker bits will not escape on the edges of my card. I'm going to repeat this same process with the purple card. This embellishment collection is called Vintage Valentine, and it has very similar shaker bits as my other card. So there's some flat backed rhinestones and pearls that I'm flipping over to make sure that the backings are on the stenciled background and that everything will shake and move once I close up my shaker panel. So again, adding the front, gently pressing, making sure that my shaker is fully enclosed. And here you can see the 2 shaker cards. I hope you enjoyed this process video of how you can use the Sizzix stencil and stamp tool with a great mix of Sizzix supplies as well as Scrapbook.com exclusives. Let me know in the comments if you like the purple or the pink card best. I think I love them both equally as they're so different yet so cute individually. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Scrapbook.com for having me on their YouTube channel today. You can find a list of everything I use down below in the description box. Bye!